The dishwasher was still running when she walked in. Plates clinking, the soft hum of rinse water, the faint scent of lemon detergent. All of it just loud enough to make the silence scream. That's how I planned it. She dropped her keys into the bowl by the door, just like always. Shoes kicked off lazily. I imagine she looked around, confused at first. Not panicked. Just something felt off. No dog barking. No couch cushions on the floor, like usual. No socks on the stairs she always told me to pick up. Then the silence began to stretch. She called my name once. No answer. Not because I wasn't home, but because I wasn't hers anymore. The bedroom closet was empty. Drawers pulled out. Mirror on the dresser cracked. Not broken, just cracked, like the reflection she was about to face. On the dining table, a note. Just one line, written in her lipstick. You lied with your mouth. I answered with my feet. I wonder if she remembered then. The Thursday 2 months ago. The gray sweater she said she lost, that I later found stuffed under the passenger seat of her car. Still carrying the cologne I never wore. Or the quiet smirk she gave her phone when she thought I wasn't watching. Or the way she started locking the bathroom door during showers. But I didn't need to ask. I already knew. That night, while she was busy lying to my face, I was busy memorizing her patterns. While she whispered to him in hotel rooms, I was opening new bank accounts, shipping my personal items to a friend's house out of state, and transferring everything digital into my name. I was becoming invisible in her life before she even noticed I was fading. And now, she was finally alone. The apartment, our apartment, was just a skeleton now. Hollow, echoing, cold, exactly like our marriage had become. But here's the part she didn't see coming. This was just the prelude. Because I had no interest in screaming, no interest in fighting. She chose noise. I chose silence. And silence, when sharpened right, can cut much deeper than rage. Her nightmare had a beginning, and I'd already written the next 7 chapters. I didn't block her number right away. That would have been too kind. Blocking gives someone closure. It's a digital slam door, loud, dramatic, final. But I didn't want to slam anything. I wanted the silence to press on her like humidity in a windowless room. I wanted her to stew in confusion, then anger, then fear. So I left the line open, but never replied. 10 unread messages the first night. Mostly question marks. Then, are you okay? Then, where are you? By the next day, she was calling. I let it ring every single time, and I made sure her voicemails were never answered. I wanted her to hear the same emptiness I had felt for the last 2 years every time she walked in the door without looking me in the eye. She thought I just left. But I hadn't. I had evaporated. Every trace of me, gone. My clothes, my laptop, even the charging cable she always borrowed when hers broke. Vanished. The photo of us at Lake Superior? Taken from the frame. I didn't even leave the backing. The furniture? Moved out in 2 hours thanks to an off-the-books moving crew I paid in cash and silence. I even paid extra to make sure the guys never said a word if anyone asked. By the time she returned from her retreat, I still wonder if Brandon even knew she was married. Our apartment looked like a Craigslist listing that expired months ago. I checked the hidden camera in the hallway later. She stood in the doorway for almost a full minute before walking inside. She kept looking around like she was in someone else's home. I watched her mouth slowly say my name. No sound came out. She moved toward the bedroom, opened the closet, and froze. When she pulled open the nightstand drawer, she must have found the letter I had left, the one folded in the shape of a tulip, because she always said flowers meant more when they weren't real. Inside was a simple message. You can't fix what you pretended wasn't broken. You can't ghost someone you're still married to. But I can. And that was it. No screaming. No threats. Just my absence. But here's what she didn't know. While she was still trying to understand why I left, I was already on step 4 of my plan. See, Lorna was reckless. Not just in her cheating. She was reckless with the small things too. Like using my old laptop to log into her email once, then never clearing the saved passwords. She always underestimated how quietly someone can watch when they stop trying to be seen. That week, I logged into her work inbox from a library computer 2 towns over. Harmless at first, calendar invites, marketing spreadsheets, boring stuff. But then I found the thread, the one she didn't bother to delete. It was titled, "He'll Never Find Out." It was between her and a woman named Ivy, her coworker. The first message was 6 weeks old. It started with, "Okay, so Brandon thinks she's single now," faced with tears of joy. And ended with, Once Howard is out of the picture, everything's gonna line up. That was the moment I knew it wasn't just an affair. It was a setup. They weren't just waiting for me to leave. They were engineering my exit. Too bad I left on my own terms. Too bad they didn't know what else I took with me. Because as I sat there, logged into her inbox, I opened a second tab and pulled up something she never thought I'd touch, the shared bank account. What I saw next made my hands go cold. And that's when I stopped planning and started executing. I stared at the screen for almost 10 minutes, not moving, not blinking. The number on our shared account had dropped by over $42,000 in 4 months. I thought it was a mistake at first, some kind of glitch or miscalculation. But it wasn't. It was her. Every withdrawal was clean, timed, precise, small enough to avoid suspicion, but frequent enough that I knew it was no accident. Clothing boutiques I'd never heard of. High-end restaurants we'd never eaten at. Hotel bookings under strange cities I knew she had no business in. Spa visits. Premium subscriptions. Even a Venmo trail labeled with emojis I didn't want to interpret. Lipstick kiss marks, eggplants, champagne bottles, flames. Brandon must have been enjoying my paycheck more than I was. Here's what stung the most. I used to tell Lorna we should travel. I remember suggesting we take a trip to the Pacific Northwest. She said flights were too expensive. That money was tight. That we should focus on saving. Turns out, we were saving just fine. For her other life. But I didn't get angry. Not yet. Anger would have made me sloppy. I took a deep breath and copied every transaction, every date, and every dollar into a spreadsheet. I spent 2 straight days creating a color-coded breakdown of her betrayal. Not just for evidence, for clarity. I needed to see the map of lies. I needed to understand how deeply she'd underestimated me. It was around then I made my first move. I called the bank and asked a simple question. What happens if I freeze an account that's jointly owned but funded primarily by one party? The rep on the phone hesitated, said it depended on the state, said I might need a legal claim. But she also said something else, something Lorna had clearly never considered. If one party can prove financial misconduct or marital fraud, the freeze can be approved temporarily while under review. So I hired someone. A lawyer, yes. But more importantly, a divorce financial forensic. I didn't even know that job existed before this. Turns out, there are professionals who specialize in digging into marital finances when one partner is being bled dry without realizing it. Within 48 hours, I had a full summary report in my inbox. It confirmed what I already knew, and what she thought I never would. By the end of the week, our shared account was locked. No warning, no text, nothing. I watched the phone records and saw 3 calls from her to the bank the next day. None lasted more than 4 minutes. She didn't leave a voicemail. The silence must have been suffocating. She texted me that night. Are you serious right now? Why is our account frozen? Call me, please. Still, I said nothing. But I knew silence wouldn't be enough. I wanted her to feel every ounce of the confusion, the panic, the paranoia she had gifted me for the past year. But this time, with interest. So I made my second move. I emailed her boss. Not some angry rant. Not a dramatic revelation. Just an anonymous tip. A fake Gmail, a VPN reroute, and one carefully crafted sentence. Thought you'd want to know one of your employees has been stealing marketing assets for a side project with a competitor. Check the access logs for April 12th to 18th. I had no idea if she'd actually done it. But Lorna wasn't careful with her digital trail. And her agency was in competition with another firm, one where Brandon just so happened to work. I figured the smoke alone would be enough to light a fire. And it was. 3 days later, her work email pinged, the one she hadn't logged out of yet, with a subject line I'll never forget. Internal investigation. Immediate HR inquiry required. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. She thought this was about the money. She thought this was about the affair. But what she never understood, what people like her never understand, is that when you betray someone who spent their entire life avoiding conflict just to keep you happy, you don't just break their heart. You give them permission. There's something eerie about knowing a person better than they know themselves. I used to call it love. Now, I call it leverage. Lorna was predictable. Her panic was textbook. I had a full view of it, not just from the silent alert set on her email accounts, but from her digital behavior. She started logging into our old streaming platforms again, clearly trying to see if I had changed the passwords. I had. She tried logging into our shared Dropbox, where we kept old photos and tax documents. Also locked. She even tried to recover access to my secondary Gmail, the one I used for job hunting and fantasy football. Why? Because she thought I was still the same man who once let her read my journal after a fight to show I had nothing to hide. But now, I was hiding everything. I tracked her browser activity from the old iPad I hadn't wiped yet. Rookie mistake on her part. She started searching phrases like, how to trace a missing spouse legally, can you sue for emotional distress and divorce, and how to find out if someone has opened a P.O. box. She wasn't just confused anymore. She was scared. And that meant the timing was perfect for the next step. I needed her to look over her shoulder, to question everyone around her. So I called in a favor, someone from the life I had before Lorna, someone she never met. My cousin Davis is the kind of guy who wears suits to gas stations and remembers faces better than names. He works in private security now, mostly for high-end real estate firms. But in college, he was that guy who could convince a professor you were sick just by making a phone call in the right tone. I didn't need him to do much. Just sit in a car near her workplace for a couple of days. Text me when she arrived. Let her see him looking once. Maybe twice. That's it. It worked faster than I imagined. On day 2, she snapped a photo of him through her office window and sent it to Ivy, her co-conspirator. I know this because Ivy, despite being this smart, used the same password across her devices, including Instagram. She saved the photo in her DMs. I watched in real time as Lorna texted. Do you recognize this guy? He was outside again this morning. Are you sure he's not one of your husband's weird friends? He looks like he works for someone. I feel like I'm being watched. You are, Lorna. You absolutely are. But not by who you think. See, I wasn't watching to intimidate. I was watching to confirm. And that's when I noticed something strange. She had stopped going home after work. The apartment, the shell she once shared with me, was mostly vacant during the evenings. I checked building entry logs, another favor, this one from the super I used to fix his computer for free, and learned she hadn't stayed a full night there in over a week. So where was she sleeping? My guess was Brandon's place, but when I checked the address I'd traced back from his Venmo profile, I noticed something off. He was in Houston, not local. So unless she was flying out midweek for secret sleepovers, there was more to uncover. That's when I remembered the hidden GPS tracker. I had installed it almost a year ago. Not out of paranoia, out of fear. At the time, I thought she might have been in danger coming home late from the office so often. Funny how time reframes everything. I logged into the app, checked the latest location, and sure enough, her car had been parked at a gated townhouse on Bellamy Avenue for 5 nights straight. I recognized the neighborhood. Suburban, well-groomed, expensive. Not somewhere Lorna could afford on her salary, even before I froze the accounts. So I dug deeper. The property was listed under the name Raymond Salter, a married client from her agency, 49 years old, with a wife who sat on the board of a private school and a golden retriever named Beans. Yes, I found their family blog. Yes, it was exactly what you're imagining. This wasn't just a messy affair. This was dangerous. And now Lorna wasn't just cheating on me. She was cheating with someone who had far more to lose than I ever did. So I made one call. Not to Raymond. Not to Lorna. But to a PI whose specialty was, let's just say, high-value marital conflicts. I wasn't planning to ruin her life. Not yet. But I was ready to let her ruin it herself. I just needed to start the clock ticking. I never set out to destroy her. That's the truth. I only wanted her to feel what I felt. Not for a moment, but for months. I wanted her to experience the same dull panic that clings to your chest at 3:47 a.m. when you know something's wrong but can't name it. I wanted her to feel the loneliness of eating in silence, the bitterness of being the only one still trying. That was the original plan. But that plan didn't survive what I found next. When my PI called me, a man so emotionally neutral, he once told me his wife gave birth, and he responded with noted. He actually sounded concerned. That alone told me something was off. He'd followed Lorna for 2 days. Confirmed she was staying at the townhouse on Bellamy. Confirmed she used a garage code. And confirmed that Mr. Raymond Salter didn't appear to know she was there. She had a key. She let herself in when the house was empty. And she stayed exactly 6 hours every visit. 6 hours. Not overnight. Not weekend getaways. 6 strategic, precisely timed hours, usually between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. It was Ivy who tipped me off. Unintentionally, of course. I was combing through her cloud account again. She hadn't changed a single password. Bless her shallow soul. And I found a screenshot she'd saved from a notes app. The top line read, Client Access Plan, Raymond. Underneath was a list of assets. Brand decks, internal financials, ad rollout schedules. Every item tied back to Raymond's company, the one Lorna's agency represented, the one Brandon's firm was currently trying to poach. That's when it hit me. Lorna wasn't just sleeping with her client. She was selling his company's secrets to her affair partner. For money. Everything suddenly aligned. The weekly withdrawals, the vague mentions of strategy in her emails to Ivy, the extra meetings that didn't appear on her calendar. Lorna wasn't just cheating on me emotionally or physically. She was committing corporate espionage, and she was too arrogant to realize how traceable her fingerprints were. That changed the nature of everything. Now, it wasn't about hurting her feelings. Now, it was about burning the mask she'd been hiding behind. I reached out to a whistleblower hotline tied to Raymond's firm. I used a voice modulator, sent in the screenshots, and provided a detailed timeline that matched her login sessions with the firm's private portal. I didn't even ask for a reward. That wasn't the point. I just wanted her to feel it, the cold touch of consequence. I knew it worked because, 4 days later, Raymond's wife, the one from the family blog, posted a cryptic status on Facebook that simply read, Betrayal isn't always about sex. Sometimes it's about secrets sold behind your back by someone who knew how to smile while doing it. Comments were turned off. The next morning, Lorna's agency was flagged in a press leak as cooperating with a third-party audit related to internal client data handling. No names were released, but the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. I kept tabs on her phone activity and saw a call placed to Ivy that lasted 1 minute and 6 seconds. The last one they'd ever make. Ivy's social media went dark the same day. Lorna didn't reach out to me once. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a middle finger emoji. That told me she wasn't just suspicious, she was unraveling. And unraveling people make mistakes. So I sent her a package. No return address. Inside was a flash drive and a single sticky note that said, You know what's on here. But do they? The drive was blank. Empty. Not even a file directory. But it didn't matter. The moment she plugged it in, she'd assumed the worst, that someone had a copy of everything, that her quiet little husband had seen more than she thought, that her web of secrets was no longer webbed, just tangled threads being pulled apart one by one. She wouldn't sleep that night, or the night after, because once someone thinks they've been exposed, paranoia does the rest for you. I didn't need to yell, didn't need to threaten. All I had to do was whisper at the right moment, and let her mind destroy the rest. When Lorna finally called me, her voice didn't sound angry. It sounded small, thin, like someone trying not to cry in a public place. I was standing in a checkout line at a gas station halfway across the state when her name lit up the burner phone I'd only ever given to 3 people. One of them was my lawyer. The second was Davis. The third? Well, Lorna never got this number. That meant someone gave it to her. That meant she was getting desperate. I didn't answer. I let it ring until voicemail, then silenced the phone completely. I didn't need to hear her voice to know what she'd say. I already knew the routine. First would come the plea. We can talk. Then the guilt trip. You're ruining everything. And finally, the pivot. Let's be adults about this. She always used that phrase when she was trying to control the narrative, when she was losing. She tried texting next. I read them, not immediately, but eventually, just to confirm how much she didn't know. Who's been contacting my clients? Are you spying on me? What did you do, Howard? No question mark on the last one. Just 3 question marks after my name, like she was shouting it into a void. I guess in her mind, she still thought she could shame me into submission. Still thought I was the same man who once apologized for raising my voice when I caught her in a lie about a fake work dinner. Still thought I was weak enough to be guilt. But I didn't need her guilt anymore. I had something better. Her signature. Weeks before I left, I had quietly collected several legal documents she'd signed over the years. Contracts, leases, a few NDAs she never bothered to keep. I had them reviewed by my lawyer and matched with timestamps, communications, and phone records. Why? Because I suspected that some of her recent side consulting work wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. And if anything went nuclear, I wasn't going to be standing in the blast radius with her. That's the part she didn't realize. This wasn't a cold war between exes. This was a quiet extraction. I wasn't fighting her. I was removing myself from her mess before it exploded. And now that it was mid-combustion, She was scrambling for the one person who used to clean up her ashes. I didn't respond to her messages, but I did send one thing: a photocopy of the letter I'd mailed her employer 2 weeks prior. The letter was short, concise, and signed by my attorney. It read, "Please be advised that my client, Howard Meller, has no knowledge of or participation in any freelance consulting work performed by Lorna Meller outside of her official employment. Furthermore, he has formally withdrawn all financial and legal ties to the activities in question. Any attempt to associate his name with such activity will be pursued as defamation." She read the message within 30 seconds. She didn't reply. That's when I knew she'd finally understood. She was alone in this. And the silence didn't stop at me. Over the next few days, she began unraveling everywhere. Her social media went into full damage control, old pictures deleted, captions wiped clean, story highlights mysteriously vanished. I watched her try to curate a new version of herself in real time, like a digital eraser could undo real-world consequences. But people talk. And in her world, whispers are louder than announcements. Ivy stopped responding to her. Brandon, too. Or at least, he stopped reacting to her posts. Her usual circle of agency colleagues began liking each other's photos conspicuously without including her. She was radioactive. And then, right when it looked like she might vanish into the digital background for good, she made one last mistake. She showed up at my sister's house. It was unannounced. I wasn't there, of course. I hadn't spoken to my sister in over 2 months for her own protection. But Lorna didn't know that. She must have thought I'd retreated to a familiar place. She must have believed I was still the man who clung to routine and ran home to people when cornered. She knocked on the door, then rang twice. My sister didn't open it. She just peeked through the side window and waited. Lorna stood there holding something in her hands. A framed photo of me from our wedding day. When no one came to the door, she set it down on the porch and walked away. No note. No message. Just the frame. Cracked across the glass. My face, split down the middle. And I knew then what she still hadn't fully accepted. She didn't just lose me. She lost her audience. Her enabler. Her mirror. And what happens to people like Lorna? When no one's watching anymore, they start watching themselves. And that's when the real horror begins. It started with a voicemail. Not from Lorna, but from someone named Sharon. Middle-aged, tired voice, clipped tone. HR manager at her agency. She wasn't calling me to ask for my help. She was calling because Lorna had listed me as her emergency contact 4 years ago and apparently never updated it. The message was simple. "Mr. Meller, this is Sharon Templeton from Brixton and Row. We've had an incident involving your wife. She's not hurt, but she became extremely distressed during a compliance audit and had to be escorted from the building. Please call us back if you have any information that might help." I didn't call back, but I did listen to the voicemail again, twice. Not out of concern. I was beyond that. I played it again to hear the moment Sharon hesitated before saying wife. That little pause. Like she didn't believe it was still true. Like Lorna's own identity was starting to fall apart in the mouths of people who once trusted her. That's when I knew. The real revenge was happening on its own now. I didn't have to plant seeds anymore. I just had to let the weeds grow. You see, people like Lorna build their reputations like glass towers. Tall, sparkling, and fragile as hell. The moment you introduce even one quiet, irrefutable truth into their world, the rest begins to crack from the weight of their lies trying to hold it all together. And what was that truth? That she had no version of her story that made sense anymore. She couldn't say she was still married because I'd vanished. She couldn't say she was single because the financials said otherwise. She couldn't play the victim because evidence of her affair, her side hustle sabotage, and her messages to Brandon and Ivy were all now known to people who mattered more than her online followers. The PI I hired didn't just observe. He documented everything. There were time-stamped videos of her entering Raymond Salter's home, copies of the files she downloaded, even a voice recording she didn't know existed, a slip of her tongue during a lunch meeting with Ivy, where she joked, "I've gotten more out of that marriage than any contract I've signed." That line alone was enough to gut her credibility when Raymond's wife got a copy. Yes, I sent it. Not in anger. Not as vengeance. I sent it the way you send an invoice, formally, without apology. Raymond's wife didn't respond. She didn't have to. But she did take legal action 2 days later, filing a motion that froze a string of assets and exposed a number of transactions Lorna had tried to bury under fake consulting invoices. I know this because the document was public record, and I read every line. By then, Lorna had gone quiet. Online, professionally, personally, she ghosted her remaining friends. Ivy's account disappeared entirely, and Brandon, well, he moved back to Dallas, if the change of address on his LinkedIn was any indication. And just when I thought her radio silence might mean she was finally processing the fallout, she made her last move. She tried to paint me as unstable. She filed a report, vague, unsubstantiated, just enough to be legally irritating. Said she felt threatened by my silence. That my disappearance was aggressive. That she had concerns. I was manipulating her professional network from the shadows. The officer who followed up was polite, but unconvinced. I handed him my documentation, dated notices of financial separation, copies of property removal approvals, screenshots of emails requesting no contact. He skimmed through the folder and said something I'll never forget. She's scared because she lost the script. She thought I was some sideshow act in her story, the meek husband who'd leave quietly and be forgotten by the next season. But I didn't leave. I didn't scream. I just let people see her. That's all it ever took. Truth doesn't need to yell when it's wearing a name badge. By the end of that week, her attorney sent me a formal request to speak. Off the record. I declined. I had nothing left to say. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want an explanation. I wanted the silence to finish its job. And it almost had. Almost. But there was still one thing left. Something she hadn't seen coming. Not because it was hidden, but because she never thought I had the courage to reclaim it. The house was quiet again, but not empty. There were no echoes this time. No anxiety riding the walls. No voices in my head asking what I did wrong. Just the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the gentle creak of wood settling into itself, and the faint sound of birds outside a window that finally opened with ease. I had rebuilt slowly, not in defiance, but in clarity. Every piece of furniture I now owned, I chose myself. Nothing recycled from the past. Nothing that used to belong to us. I even replaced the coffee maker, the one Lorna insisted on keeping despite never drinking coffee. Small things, maybe, but they felt like acts of reclamation. Freedom doesn't always show up with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives as the first morning you wake up without flinching when you hear your own name in your head. I got a job offer 2 months after the chaos died down. New city, smaller company, fewer politics. I took it without hesitation. There were no memories in that place. No shadows of who I used to be. Just possibility. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment near a lake and started biking again, something I hadn't done since college. I told no one where I moved. Not out of spite, just peace. As for Lorna, I stopped following, stopped checking, stopped caring. She sent one final message a few weeks later. It simply read, "You didn't have to do all that." I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I had already done enough. She was right about one thing. I didn't have to do it. But she gave me the reason. And maybe the most poetic part of it all, I never raised my voice, never broke anything, never embarrassed her publicly or tried to go viral with screenshots. I didn't need revenge that came with applause. I just needed space to remember who I was before I became a character in her drama. I wasn't perfect. I'll never claim to be. I was passive, conflict avoidant, emotionally tired, and probably boring on most days. But I loved sincerely. I gave her the safest place I had. And when she burned it, I didn't try to rebuild on the ashes. I walked away and found new ground. The last photo I took before deleting all my old files was of a note I taped to the bathroom mirror the day I left. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't clever. It wasn't even bitter. It just said, I didn't take everything. I just took myself back. And I did. Completely.